Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 135, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
And me, Ravi Abbott.
We're not sounding very sprightly this week, I do apologise.
We've survived Play London, basically. Oh my God, that weekend absolutely shattered us. Dan, you're now thinking of taking 2 days off after one of those events, aren't you?
Maybe 2 weeks next time. But what a weekend it was. Now, of course, we have been talking about it on the show for the last couple of months. That we were at the, the first show that we've done in London, actually, isn't it? Play Expo London, that happened. The weekend just gone on Saturday and Sunday. And I think it's fair to say that was probably the biggest and the busiest event that we've ever done.
Yeah, the crowds were absolutely huge. That whole place was rammed. It was like 3 different separate huge rooms that had loads of stuff going on, and we did 9 panels in 2 days.
I still can't quite believe we did that many.
Yeah.
We had we planned, didn't we? We looked at the schedule and we were going to have 15 minutes between them. We thought that'll give us time to get people off, maybe grab a coffee, get the next person on, but things run over.
Yeah, but everybody wants to talk to the guests and stuff, and it just gets chaotic. But what we've done, guys, is we have filmed all of it. So all of it's going to be released onto our YouTube channel, but also we're going to be releasing special episodes on the podcast.
Well, we've got to give a shout to Steve Fletcher from Waveham Studios, who, of course, did the Commodore Story documentary, who was down there all weekend filming our panels for us in beautiful quality.
Oh, yeah, and we've taken sound directly off the board, so, it's going to be the usual Retro Hour standard.
So we're going to be seeding those out probably in the next 2 weeks or so on YouTube. But today, we couldn't wait to get this panel out. Now, this was actually the last panel that we did of the whole weekend, and this was Knightmare.
Now, Knightmare's a TV show, isn't it? But it's it was, but it's very like a computer game as well.
Well, Knightmare, I mean, anyone that grew up in Britain in the late 80s and 90s who was into Dungeons and Dragons and adventure games and RPGs, Knightmare was kind of something that you watched alongside, your Games Masters and your Bad Influence and that kind of thing. Ran for 8 series from 1987 to 1994. And the thing about Knightmare is, after we did this panel, I've actually been watching loads of it on YouTube over the last few days.
My fiancée, never seen Knightmare in her life. After watching that panel, she was like, should we watch some Knightmare tonight? I was like, yeah, totally.
I think it's 112 episodes you need to catch up on now. But there are a few videos the funniest Knightmare deaths and stuff like that are just hilarious. And it was kind of, cross between a television show, an RPG and an adventure game as well. And also it kind of premiered kind of blue screen effects and CGI, very early CGI too.
Yeah, and it was very British, because it had a lot of Shakespearean actors, so they'd be talking in Shakespearean style, and they were a lot of them classically trained actors as well, which was really cool to see on this kids' TV show.
And the one thing you'll find out about Knightmare when we do this interview is how much of it was all ad-libbed. That very rarely planned anything, really. They might know a direction that they'd have to take the adventurer on, but obviously they don't know what the kids are going to say to them. So.
And they had a lot of CGI in there. I remember they used Amiga 3000s for some of it, right?
And there was a Quantel paint box, I think, was a main machine that they used for it. I only know that because there is a YouTuber called Retro Gamer VX, and he's actually got the actual Quantel paint box that they used on Knightmare set up in his living room at the moment. So he's been doing restoration videos on that. So I'll link those in the show notes. But this week, we're going to bring you the panel that we recorded all about this groundbreaking show that anyone who's a bit of a geek in the late 80s and 90s used to watch on TV in Britain. We've got Hugo Myatt, who played the Dungeon Master Treguard. He was like the face of Knightmare, really. David Rowe, who did a lot of the hand-painted sets in the earlier episodes of Knightmare. And Paul Flannery, who has brought Knightmare back, because it's also a live stage show now, isn't it?
Yeah, so they're doing this kind of live Knightmare experience, and it's cool because kids can come with their parents and kind of experience Knightmare when you actually can't these days. And there was also a YouTuber special of Knightmare recently as well that we talk about.
Yeah, about 4 years ago. Ashens did it, didn't he? He was kind of behind it with YouTube and their Geek Week. So, all of that is coming up. If you loved Knightmare back in the day, you were going to find this interview so interesting. It was the last one that we did the whole weekend. I was a bit starstruck, if I'm honest, sitting next to Treguard. We
saved the best till last as well.
So we're going to run that on this week's show. That panel from Play Expo, the Knightmare panel, is coming up in around 15 minutes from now. But we talk about other panels that we did. I think they were all such good standard over the weekend.
Oh, they were awesome. Really, really good stuff. And I think the next week we should run another, because they were just fantastic. We had a great panel with Andrew Hewson and Rob Hewson, and it was like the dad and son kind of, the dad telling all the old tales and the son talking about how he's coming back.
Because we've had Rob on the show about a year, 2 years ago when he was making that Hyper Sentinel game. But you're right, we actually did a proper panel with Andrew Hewson talking about the founding of Hewson Consultants and all that. So I think it will be interesting to run that one on the podcast, next week, hopefully. And we did a Digitizer panel, we did a YouTube panel that was massive.
Yeah, the Oliver twins announced that they were doing a new Dizzy for the Spectrum next.
Another one.
That's exciting.
Archie McLean, we had him on. Hopefully going to run that in the next few weeks as well. Retro Gaming the Movie, that was a good one. Ant Stream. There's so many over the weekend. So if you did come along, because we had that many listeners who actually came up, all loved the show. We were literally rushed off our feet, so apologies if we did seem a little bit, rushed.
Oh, it was awesome, just having people come up and say, oh, we listen. It's like we produce this, but we never see faces, so that was great.
Makes the whole thing worthwhile, and we're going to be doing it again in a few months.
Oh, God. Hopefully this one will be a bit more of a chilled pace than London because it's Blackpool and the drinks are cheap. It's good fun.
So that's coming up at the end of October, 27th and 28th. Play Expo Blackpool is going to be on now. I'm probably going to give the Saturday a miss because, unfortunately, I've got nothing planned for the rest of October. Apart from that day, it is Joe's wife's 30th birthday. They're having a party. It's my cousin's wedding.
That's a Moana-themed party. I wanted to go to that, but I'm going to Blackpool.
You were gutted. It's my cousin's wedding on the same day as well, and Play Expo. Literally, I've got nothing else on for the rest of the month.
What we're thinking of doing is actually bringing in a friend of the show, DJ Slopes, to kind of do some stuff with us, and we are working on creating the panels at the moment, but guys, we're going to have some fantastic ones there. And, I love Blackpool because it's more of a community kind of vibe. London's a big glam, glitzy show, and so is Manchester usually. But Blackpool's got that cool vibe where you could all just hang out and dance to cheesy music or karaoke.
And I'll try and make it over for the Sunday, I'm sure. So if you want to get tickets for that, they're on sale now. You can get them via our website or playexpoblackpool.com, and we will see you there. And just before we get into the news stories this week, we need to give a huge thank you to the people who allow us to keep doing the Retro Hour podcast week in, week out, because I still can't believe that we're nearly at the end of August and we'll be almost at this show's 3rd anniversary soon.
It's crazy. And all you guys that help the show, you really help out with events like this. God, how many flyers did we have? Tons of them. And we could bring them all across, and we had pop-up banners and stuff. So thank you so much if you're donating to the show.
Honestly, it really does make such a massive difference because, we were handing out flyers to people that we got printed and looking at the banners and the like. People that may have watched us on YouTube but never seen the podcast before, which you still get amazingly.
Totally.
We've done it 2.5 years.
And also, we had an awful problem of completely messing up our recordings all the time. Now we've been able to get a recording device that's solid, and it means we can bring you all these shows for YouTube and the podcast.
Yeah, and we keep getting people through the door, improve our hosting. We've got a new website that we're working on. So, and even hosting a podcast every week costs quite a lot in hosting services. So anything we get into the running of the show, guys, it is massively appreciated. And of course, every penny that we get goes back into the running of the Retro Hour podcast. And you will find your place in the Retro Hour Hall of Fame just for making a donation. Like this week, Matthew Martin,
S. Serger,
Simon Rose,
and Alan Purdom,
and Wes Darley, who all made donations into the running of the Retro Hour podcast. And you can do the same. All you got to do is head to our website. We have cryptocurrency there for you into that, or a PayPal button. Fill in your address in there. It'll convert any currency, and it will all go back into the running of the show and is massively appreciated. And you'll find that at theretrohour.com. Now, before we run our interview that we recorded with the Knightmare panel. Oh, so interesting. Hugo Myatt, Treguard, we are not worthy. I've got to put the selfie as well that we took with him on Facebook before this episode comes out. Maybe even as a show artwork, actually, because it was that cool. So before we get into that, though, there are some news stories that we'd like to talk about this week. Has been quite a busy week in the world of retro, and a game that I think we talked about on one of our earliest episodes, and we did have Matt on the show at some point as well. Tanglewood is finally here.
Yes, Tanglewood's finally released, and we had a go on some early kind of press copies. And
I broke it.
And Dan broke the physical copy ages ago, but this is not the version that we played. We played a kind of pre-release versions. So I've not played the main one, but I'm sure there's not much difference because it was only a few days between them. Now, Tanglewood is a full new game that's been made for the Mega Drive, and this is majorly cool. It's been done with all Sega development hardware, and it's programmed in raw assembly.
Yeah, pure 68K, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's really, really fast, and it's on Windows, Macs, and Linux as well. And it also comes on a 16-bit real cartridge. So this is crazy. It's been getting, press all over the place. I've seen it in, is it the Daily Star? I saw it in all the big newspapers.
I knew you were a Daily Star reader. I could tell by looking at you, Remy.
But it's been all over the place. And
I buy it for the articles, honestly. But it has, you're right. I mean, the fact that having a new Sega Mega Drive game in 2018 is cool anyway, but having one to this standard, I mean, this raised like £55,000 on Kickstarter when it was on there.
Well, how much were Mega Drive carts when you originally bought them?
Oh, God, about 50 quid.
Okay, so it's £54 for this release, which is pretty cool.
That was 50
on a
quid.
cart.
Yeah, 50 quid in 1992 money, which is about 80, 90 now, isn't it?
But it's only 15 quid if you want to get it on Steam.
But when you get it on Steam, you also get a ROM that you can put on a flash drive and play it on the Mega Drive.
So that's the whole thing. Basically, if you get it on Steam, I played it on the PC, so instantly went into an emulator, all pre-configured, loaded up, worked with my Xbox One remote. But you could download it, put the ROM onto an EverDrive or something like that, and then just go for it on your original hardware. Or you could get the actual physical Tanglewood cart with case and all of that. Now, the cool thing about this game is, when I played it before, the pace of it seemed like it was incomplete because it was a demo.
The early version.
Early version. Now, I played the latest version in it, and everything's paced correctly. So, you wander around, and it reminds me a lot of Lion King, actually. You
it's a platformer, isn't it?
Yeah, you wander around, you find certain elements, but then suddenly, the atmosphere changes, the pace increases, you've got to do puzzles, and suddenly the music comes on. So I was actually finding myself getting a bit bored during the demo. This one, I found that the way that the levels are designed, the exploration, really captures your imagination, and it keeps you going back and forth, and you're like, oh, damn, I just missed that jump. And it was really exciting. They have a kind of day and light effects in there.
Yeah, that was a bit that impressed me most, because at some point, I mean, you essentially play, does he specify what it is? It looks a bit like a little fox.
Yeah, it is a fox.
Yeah, it's called Nim, isn't it?
I think it's a vixen. I'm not sure.
Well, it's running through the forest, and then it looks all like la 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 la, daisies everywhere. Then suddenly it's like nighttime, and like creatures come out.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, there's these whole dream sequences, and when it does it, there's different cycles. So you're going into different parts. At one point, the screen turns kind of a purpley orange and all this kind of colour, and then another time it will be all bright and sunny, and, so it's really got atmosphere, and the sound is really good on it as well. Like all the little sound effects, they're really those kind of Mega Drivey, like ooh, hey, you know.
It is a love letter to those early 90s platformers, but also, like I said, there with concepts that you didn't really see back then. It's got a lot more depth to it, I think, than those old games.
That's it, and it's not just one of these ones that's been developed on the PC, then chucked on something, or developed in kind of a easy program to do it on. It's been done in the raw code. Like, I went to a lesson where Matt was teaching assembly, and I sat at the back, and I was lost in the first 5 minutes. It was so advanced.
So you put the disc in, right? I'd say I'm lost.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it has been a game that I know the Mega Drive community have been really excited about for the last couple of years. And the fact that it is finally here, it's finally complete. And from the early reviews I've seen on YouTube, like today, it is getting a lot of love already.
Yeah, I've only had time really because this was just before play to get to like level 3. But that was awesome fun, and I can't wait to explore it more.
Absolutely. So if you want to get hold of that, we'll put a link in this week's show notes where you can buy it from on our website at theretrohour.com. One thing we won't be linking to is ROMs. And that is what was technically termed abandonware ROMs.
Well, last episode, actually, we were talking about Nintendo cracking down on emulators, and we actually said, no, but ROM sites seem to be all right. And about a day afterwards, Emu Paradise got taken down.
It was your fault.
That's it.
So Emu Paradise, for those that may not know, would you say that's probably the biggest ROM website? Or it was?
Yeah, by far. It's been running for 18 years.
Yeah.
And probably the best thing about Emu Paradise was a lot of all the other ROM sites on it, not that I'm experienced or anything, would have a lot of adverts that you'd have to click through to get to stuff. Emu Paradise would just offer you access, but they'd also host stuff like Homebrew and the cool Homebrew apps. Now, Nintendo have decided to start suing these ROM sites, which they've kind of left alone for a long time. Now, they were seeking £150,000 for each Nintendo game offered.
Whoa.
And these guys probably have like over 150,000 or the entire collection. So I think it's wiser that they take them all offline rather than face that legal action.
But also, not only that, they're looking for also up to 2 million for each trademark infringement. So on top of the code, like Mario and stuff like that. That is a lot.
It's really crazy. And I have lots of ROMs and I kind of keep them archived now. And I think if you talk to people in the retro community, you could probably get hold of them. But there'll be a few on torrent sites and stuff. But I think they're really going to start disappearing offline. They're going to be a rarity that people are going to have full collections of stuff. Since these Raspberry Pi builds have been coming out with everything put on it, and all the companies are starting to go, oh, retro, we want to get involved with that. They're going to start taking back all of the kind of stuff that they ignored before.
Well, they've took down another one called Love ROMs as well. Nintendo is suing them. Another big ROM site. The thing about it is, why do you think now then? Do you think it's because of like these kind of homebrew kits that are coming out and they want to get the market, I guess, with their mini consoles?
Totally, yeah. That's it, 100%. They didn't care before.
Yeah.
And I think, like, if they see stuff with the Raspberry Pi and then people downloading full images and then putting it into a custom Nintendo case, and you've got every single game for every console on there, including PlayStation stuff and all of that, I think it's just it's totally taking their kind of stuff away, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's taking their business away,
yeah.
I guess, technically. But like I said, the annoying thing about it is, I mean, Emu Paradise, they've took up like pretty much all their stuff down now, I think.
I guess there's still going to be a good site for homebrew stuff, and I think, maybe the community will thrive, like just turn into homebrew communities rather than ROM communities.
Well, off the back of that, I mean, Kotaku did a really interesting article that came out, today at the time of recording this. It's called In Defense of ROMs, a solution to dying games and broken copyright laws. Now, what they're saying is, like you said, pretty much emulation websites and ROM websites have kind of been around as long as the internet has, really, haven't they? They've grown with the rise of the web, at least. I mean, I remember downloading, like, Commodore 64 ROMs.
Well, even pre-web, I remember getting, like, emulators, like, on discs, and you'd have loads of different versions of them, and kind of, you get even ROMs on floppy disks at points as well.
Well, actually, I had Spectrum ROMs on an Amiga emulator, I remember that. I got on a disc off a friend. But the thing is, like you said, people didn't really care for a long time. But then they're looking at, what is the solution to this? I mean, the downside of it is there are games that people want to play that there is no other way to play them unless you've got the ROM. I mean, you've got flashcards and stuff now. I can play games on my Mega Drive that I could never in a million years get hold of. These rare Japanese games that there might be like 20 copies of, and they go for like 500 quid on eBay.
It's weird because, like, I see it as a kind of a Steam thing. Like, when Steam was around early on, there was kind of a lot of need for piracy, and people would be pirating all the games. But then as Steam got more popular and there was Humble Bundles and all these licensing and stuff, it kind of really reduced the price of games, and then that meant more people were using it. So maybe stuff like Antstream coming around, maybe stuff like the mini consoles, that's all affecting it, and they're seeing it as revenue.
Well, I think you're right there, and this article on Kotaku actually kind of agrees with you. They make a good point. When was the last time you downloaded an MP3?
Oh, God. I haven't. I've streamed music since then and totally ignored MP3 download. I don't have any music on my hard drive. Yeah. I think I only have collection of old school garage tunes. That's it, really.
Well, that's the thing. They're saying that no one really downloads MP3s anymore because you've got Spotify and Apple Music, and it's so easily accessible for an affordable price. So what they're saying is, a kind of solution they put up here is, say, for example, Nintendo have took down that Love ROMs website. They've actually got the domain off them now, so Nintendo own it.
Oh, wow.
What they're probably going to do is put up like a finger-wagging, don't copy ROMs website. But what if instead you went to Love ROMs and Nintendo put their games up there and you could play them in like a web interface?
Or do what Dream 17 did and just know people were pirating and they love the games and just release them all yourselves, like legitimate copies.
What about if they sell the ROMs for like £1 each?
Well, that's what they want to do. Ultimately, they want to sell about 50 copies of the same game to all these different formats and systems.
But that is a problem, though, isn't it? It's because I look at how many times have I bought Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2 on like the Xbox and
Shovel Knight. I've got that on everything.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah. And these old games, I mean, if you want to, I mean, they're on Xbox Arcade and PSN, but then you've got to buy them on every different platform. You probably bought the same game that you paid for originally back in 1992 about 10 times since. Yeah. But what you want is a ROM so you can play it anywhere.
But that's also good for for them because they don't have to do any work. They don't have to update it, and people are still buying it 10 times. They're still getting all that revenue. So,
but I think you look at this with the Amiga like Kickstart ROMs. They were like an essential bit to emulate the Amiga. And before you had to get Amiga Forever that cost about 25, 30 quid.
Yeah.
But then they put those up, didn't they, for like £2?
Yeah.
And now if I needed them, I'd just download them off that because it's only £2. And I think of like, say, Nintendo and Sega have a website where you can buy all their back catalogue in ROM format for like £1 or £2 each. I think people will do it.
Yeah, I think they may implement some DRM into something like that, though. That's the problem.
That's when you go back on the torrent, so isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, so I think there does need to be something done there. There's got to be a solution there. Because if all these ROM websites vanish, I mean, Emu Paradise was great because it had like 3DO stuff on there and old DOS games.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like a lot of these old games, they're mega expensive to buy online. And they had ISOs of a lot of the CD stuff that's just, I'd never have a chance to play that originally. But, it won't be commercially available. But now, I don't know, have they taken all the ROMs off then or all Nintendo ROMs? They must have just totally done a full blank.
I think the computer ones were still on earlier on this week, but all the consoles are gone.
As I can't see Commodore suing anyone or any of the older companies, but...
It would be a shame if all ROM sites vanished because there's going to be a load of games that are lost to history.
In the future, it's going to be meeting someone in a back alley with a USB and they'll be like, oh, do you want all of a NES? Or something like that.
Or they'll start making new versions of those cartridge copiers that you see on Bad Influence.
Yeah.
X-Copy version 10 will come out or something. So
X-Copy XP.
just going back to like the early 90s again, aren't we? Now, before we get into this week's chat with the Knightmare panel, I love Tesla cars. I've always wanted a Tesla.
Teslas are cool as. Like, when I was in Amsterdam, they had this kind of thing where the government gave them cheap access to Teslas.
Yeah.
And I've never seen Tesla showrooms.
I have.
Yeah, and I was like, wow, they're awesome. And then in all the airport, they'd only let Teslas come into the main section, and it was so cool. One thing I don't like is they're too quiet. One appears behind you, and you're like, whoa, what's going on?
You've been run over before you realise.
Yeah.
So why are we talking about Teslas on a retro gaming podcast?
Oh, well, because there's the owner, Elon Musk, and as we've covered before, he did a bit of retro gaming himself.
Yeah, he made a few games, didn't he, back in the day?
Yeah, he made a few kind of little arcade games, and actually, a lot of people don't know this, but he's been hiding Easter eggs inside the Teslas before.
Right.
So there's some references like more cowbell, which apparently means something, and more cowbell soon. And you could send the console into hyperdrive, and the Model S had 007 as the access code.
Right, okay. That's very sci-fi.
Yeah, so he's basically talking about, it was a very small tweet, but it obviously gets people talking a lot. And he has a bit of a connection with Atari. So he says, some Atari games are going to be coming on the Tesla and released in a few weeks. Thanks, Atari.
How are they doing this then? So what, they're going to be putting Atari games in the Tesla?
Yeah, so probably on the dashboard. Or, I don't know, whilst you're driving, if you could get, like, Space Invaders on the front of your screen projected.
Is it just me, or does that sound like an incredibly bad idea?
Yeah. Like, have you heard about the self-driving in the Teslas as well? They've had this thing that they call autopilot.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like American cruise control, it's not going to do the driving for you.
Okay, it's not like Google cars.
No, but of course people have taken it too far, and there have been guys that have actually climbed outside of their car, got onto the bonnet whilst it's driving on the freeway, and took a selfie and stuff like that. And so we'll see how responsible people are with these Atari games.
Not very by the sounds of their track record so far.
At least you'll be able to hear a Tesla coming, because it'll be pew, 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 pew down the street.
Sound effects of Miss Pac-Man behind you, yeah. So, I mean, if these only work when it's stationary, that could be kind of cool. I guess if you can play pole position, maybe operated by the car steering wheel.
Yeah. You don't want to be playing stunt car racer whilst you're going around.
That could be an extraordinarily bad idea, but it's cool anyway. I'll never be able to afford a Tesla in my lifetime, so unless I see one at a showroom with it in and find out the access code. So if you want to find out more about those stories, we'll put them all in our show notes at theretrohour.com. Right then, Ravi, catch up on a bit of sleep now. Still getting over that weekend. Incredible. We will have some of the pictures as well on our Facebook page, because we did get quite a nice little collection. My most random moment, I think, of Play Expo over the weekend was we did get 5 minutes for me to run and grab a drink. I walked past and we had Alex and Joe, our two mates who were helping out with the podcast. I turned around and Alex was working on one of the retro gaming stalls.
Yeah, so they had the guy was basically like, oh, you guys look after my stall, I'll give you a free game so I can go and eat lunch. And then that deal kept happening. I don't know how many games they got from that, but they seemed pretty happy by the end.
I think they got about 6 and a controller or something Joe was saying he got.
And Paul Weller was there.
Yeah, I heard that.
Paul Weller was there and he came in and he was just like, I love pinball machines. Just went on a big pinball session.
So, I mean, I have to keep thinking of stuff like that. Did that really happen at the weekend? So I just want to put this out there. If you did buy anything from what you think is the Retro Hour stall and it didn't work, it's got nothing to do with us. They were just our mates wearing our
we don't do returns.
Just put it out there. So, if you want to find out everything that we did, of course, do follow us on social media. You can check back and all the posts from the weekend are on there. At Retro Hour UK on Twitter, Instagram, our Facebook page. We'll link all of those and the rest of the stories that we've talked about this week in our show notes at theretrohour.com. And now, recorded live at Play Expo in London over the weekend, talking about one of the most groundbreaking kids' TV shows of the late 80s and early 90s. Let's find out about Knightmare.
Ooh, nasty.
Please give a warm welcome to Hugo Myatt, David Rowe and Paul Flannery.
Welcome, strangers.
Well, it would be good. I mean, you guys don't really need any introduction, I'm sure, but it would be good to just get you guys to introduce yourselves and tell us your involvement in the world of Knightmare.
I was in it for 113 episodes. Yeah. How did I get in it? Very complicated. Knew Tim Child, the brainy one who thought this up. He asked me one day to do a pilot show for it, 15-minute pilot, wasn't going to go on the air, just try and see if it worked. 100 quid in your hand, okay, Hugo? Oh, yeah. 3 months later, he phoned up again and said, we're going to do another pilot, won't go on the air. 150 quid. All right, this could be a longer one, half hour. Yeah, right, terrific. Got me money, lovely. And that I thought would be the end of it. The rumour was they were going to find some name to front it and so on and so forth. Anyway, months later, I got a phone call from Tim saying, oh, Hugo, we've got a series. So I said, well, congratulations, well done, Tim. Best of luck with it. And he said, no, we've got a series, you and I. And so that's how I got into it.
But you, David, you had a background in graphics and video games before, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right. I was busy minding my own business as a freelance illustrator, and I wasn't aware of anything to do with Anglia TV at the time. But Tim Child was a TV reporter who wrote scripts. As the news came in, they'd be handed to the newscaster in front of the live audience, and that was his role. And he was aware of chroma key, the very early days, where the newscaster was in a blue studio and they would substitute the background. And it was also a telltale blue fringe all around where the technology was so crude. But he was a really enthusiastic adventure game player. So he would think, how do we actually get this graphically to look really good? And he came up with the idea. So there I was, minding my own business, delivering an artwork, I think it was Shadow of the Beast 2, to Melbourne House. And the art director said, well, we've had a call from Anglia TV, someone at Anglia TV wants to speak to you. So I rang up and, well, as quick as a flash, I was up there with my portfolio. And they liked the idea and they said, we've got no budget. But I said, well, I've got to be paid something. So what I ended up doing was 2 dungeon paintings and acetate overlays to slightly change them. And I saw the pilot and it worked, so we went on from there.
Well, you did video game artwork for some very famous games like Populous, Shadow of the Beast, like you said, James Pond 2, I believe you're involved in as well.
Yep, Robocod.
And I know then you had to, the graphics on the games weren't as good as the boxes, so you had to really attract the kids to want to buy that product, I imagine.
Yeah, a video game cover's got one job to do, and that's for someone to pick it up, turn it over and read what it's about. So it acts as a point of sale, but also a point of reference because people play with their imagination. You've got 8 different coloured pixels dancing around the screen. You know, it's a lot more than that because it's sold as a robot war game, and you have to imagine that war. So I think the covers should be as explicit as possible.
And Paul, you've brought back Knightmare for a new generation as Treguard in Knightmare Live.
I think I brought it back for the same generation.
Were you a fan of the original show?
Oh, God, yeah. I very much like most of my audience, I think. Around the sort of age you'd run home on Friday afternoon and watch Knightmare, terrified out of your mind, and screaming at the TV, you know, go right. Your other right. Just, all that sort of desperation. And yeah, I was doing shows up at the Edinburgh Fringe before I did Knightmare Live, doing like comedy shows and doing sort of stand-up and sketch. And then this sort of pub conversation came about. Like, what would make a good Edinburgh show? We're like, well, Crystal Maze. The budget would be ridiculous. Oddly enough, I've worked at the Crystal Maze. Now that's been made. But so we were like, oh, Knightmare. And I was like, yeah, actually, that could work. I could see it in my head working on stage. And then we sort of dug around the internet trying to find an email address for anyone, for someone who was involved, like trying to get hold of Tim Child. And I found this sort of really obscure email address, and I sent off this quite crude sort of pitch of what the stage show might look like. A few sort of hand sketch drawings of things, sort of saying, could I please do this in Edinburgh? And we got back the most cryptic email I've ever received. It said, you have reached level 1. How would you like to proceed? So yeah, we sort of sent back, got chatting to him properly. And I think his exact words were, well, you can't ruin it. So he's very generously sort of given me the live rights to go and take the show on. And that was 5 years ago. It's nearly my job. Yeah, it's got weird.
Well, Hugo, were you into like Dungeons and Dragons and Fantasies games before?
Interesting question. No, knew nothing about it. I have to say that when Tim first suggested this, the very first pilot, he took me to a pub and he explained it all to me, everything. And I said, yes, of course, I understand, yes, I see. I didn't understand a single word he was talking about. But being an actor, you would say, yes, I can abseil, yes, I can ride, so that's how I got into it.
Well, how did the character of Treguard develop then? Did you have a lot of input into that?
Yeah, I suppose I did. If you look at the early series, before we had a villain, as in Lord Fear, I actually had to supply the menace as well as the sort of advice. So the poor things, I mean, one team said to me, they got so far and they went, help. And I said, no.
I mean, I imagine the kids were probably quite nervous coming in there, were they?
Well, they never saw us except on the set. And so when the Dungeoneer came through that portal or that archway, it's the first time they'd ever seen me. And some of them were absolutely shaking like this. But it didn't take them long to stop feeling like that. A couple of minutes and they were into the game and that was it, tremendous.
Well, talking of the set, David, the visual set was just absolutely fantastic. How did you get involved with that? Because it had a real unique look.
So Tim thought this through really well, and what he realised was in order to use a blue chroma key studio and paintings, that there had to be a common anchoring factor. So he employed the services of Jean Père, the French film special effects expert, who devised a grid that would be exact from a 35mm lens, 10 feet high, angled down 10 degrees, and that rostrum was not allowed to move at all because it would destroy the illusion. So I had to do all the room paintings based on that grid, and it was 1 meter square. So, for example, a meter in from the back and the side was a 2 meter square footprint circular well. I had to draw that, all the ellipses correct, and paint it so it looked like a proper well. And then the set designers would come in and make a blue donut circle 1 meter high, 2 meters square, so the Dungeoneer could climb into that, but when it was composited, it looked like he was climbing into the well. And it was so well done that, in fact, they would... they'd get rid of all the blue fringing, but they would burn a strong spotlight onto the character, which would preserve the shadow. So they had the shadow, and the first time ever that with chroma key, you actually anchored a figure to a painting. It was groundbreaking. A lot of innovation.
So was that like a big budget, or did you have to employ lots of tricks and stuff like that to get the good effect?
Well, I just sat down and drew it and painted it. I would send off colour roughs in the early days when I thought I had a lot of time. I'd fax them, but towards the end, I'd managed to secure a lot of print work with British Telecom Soft, and game covers were coming in thick and fast. And I had Sally Freeman, the producer, on the phone 3 weeks to the first show, in tears, saying she'd not got any rooms. What am I going to do? I don't think I've got a show. So I set the alarm for 6 o'clock in the morning and worked to 2 a.m. every day for 3 weeks and turned them all over. It was, but it's exhilarating, you know. You lived on raw adrenaline. It was really enjoyable.
Well, Hugo, how was the show filmed? Was it like live to tape, or were there many retakes? Or?
No. A lot of people don't realise this. Though we recorded it, we really did it as though it were live. So there were no there were camera rehearsals, of course, but no rehearsals with the kids, and no rehearsals with the actors, really. And there were no retakes. So what you saw is what happened, which in itself was quite alarming, because before each show we thought, now what are the kids going to do? And we worked out all these scenarios of what they could possibly do. They found another one, I'll tell you. Every time they found another one. So we never quite knew what was going to happen.
I imagine you had to improvise a lot then.
I didn't as much as the poor people in what we called the void. All the actors in the void actually didn't really have any lines. They were just given a scenario, i.e. we want to get the Dungeoneer in that direction, or to do that, or not to do that, or whatever. So they did it all by improvisation, and we had, in all, I think, 31 different actors and actresses, and as far as I recall, none of them ever screwed it up, which is quite incredible. The reason it's incredible is very easy to ad-lib and take someone off, and you suddenly realise you've gone off on a tangent, and how do you get it back? And that was the discipline they really had to get, and they did it. They were brilliant.
Well, the show did have a very high quality of actors, didn't it?
Yeah. I don't know how he found them all, because some of them were absolutely stunning. Some of them very funny. I mean, Mark Knight as Lord Fear was hysterically funny. Yeah. Other thing that, talking about ad-libbing, what I had to talk back from the director, and every now and again I get this wonderful thing when I couldn't see what the team were going to do or what they were up to, and I get this thing saying, Hugo, do something. You know, you can't answer back. Like what? You know, and you see my eyes glaze over, and I start talking very, very slowly, and I say things like, team, do you think that perhaps you ought to consider the other clue object on the table?
Because you did help the kids out, though, didn't you?
Yeah, different time. If they were very small, young, I would help them more. Obviously, you know, you're interested in television values as well as, or production values as well as, you know, the game and the quest. We didn't want them to walk through the first door and blow it. Because, I mean, that would be a bit dull, wouldn't it? So we used to try and help them a bit in the first scenes. Obviously, we wanted to get them into the game, get them as far as we could.
Paul, did you have to do massive amounts of research on Hugo and kind of study his character and pick up any of his, like, techniques?
Yeah, a bit. I mean, the whole show, we sort of worked from dot to try and recreate a live version of what was going on. And it was we worked for sort of 6 months to a year before we'd even met. So we'd done a version of the show before we sort of like got together properly with... we had an initial meeting, didn't we, at one point?
Yeah, that was after you squatted for 6 months with me and I didn't know who you were.
I was in his cupboard.
No, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, sort of taking all the improvisation sort of things of it and then going, oh, is he the good guy, is he the bad guy? And trying desperately to sort of arch the eyebrows in exactly the right... Sort of, yeah, a lot of standing in the mirror and going, ooh, team! Yeah, it was an odd process. It was like, to be fair, I sort of did at the beginning was making most of the stuff. So I built 3 of the helmets, and we got the set made professionally. But I built a couple of the puppets, and basically had to learn how to use things like fiberglass, and it was again a bit like David. You end up going, okay, we've said we'll do this thing in 3 months. That's happening now. Whether it happens or not. So we better work, and I just sort of worked every day for about 3 months for about like between sort of 12 and 15 hours a day, building stuff, making costumes, organising, things, rehearsing, trying to write like an improvised show about a dungeon as well. We didn't realise, we did what you did in Series 1, the whole thing was mapped out. So if you go through door number 1 on the right, you'll end up in this room. If you go through door number 2 on the left, you'll end up in this room. It took about a month and a half before we figured out, no one knows what's through that door. We could just put anything.
Can I butt in on that for a second? This is absolutely true. The first series we did, it was exactly as Paul said. I had to learn a whole scenario for whichever door they went through. And this is a sort of arithmetic progression, because then there's another door or 2 doors. So that's 2 more things to learn. And it took them quite a time to twig. It didn't matter which damn door they went through. We only needed one scenario.
And then you're sitting there going, caution team, choices. Oh, your choice here will determine the rest of your fate. It really doesn't. It's fine. Just get through the door.
I suppose technically Knightmare was quite a linear game. It was pretty much like start to finish. But when you're watching it on TV, it didn't feel like that. It felt like anything could happen, though.
No, at school, you're sitting there mapping it out, going through the tapes of last night and going, OK, they went through the 3rd door in that room, and that led them there. We shouldn't do that. If we get on, you take the bread and the spanner, and you go through door number 2, and you're going, map it out. Right, we've got to go on Knightmare, guys. I've got the formula. I've got it sorted.
No way.
But when the child was wearing the helmet, they could just see below them.
All they could see was a circle of blue. Some of them used to cheat and try and lift the helmet up like that. They'd still just see blue. There was nothing else there,
So I always imagined as a kid that it was filmed in like a massive warehouse, but how did you stop them walking into walls and things?
Now there's a story about that one. We had a very, very far back team of girls, really nice, very, very well-spoken girls. And they put one of these lovely girls under the helmet, you see. And she was a bit of a strider. And they said, walk forward. And she went straight across, bang into the back wall. Whereupon she let out an expletive I wouldn't have thought she would known, let alone use. And that's the only time I can remember somebody shouting, cut!
That's not what she shouted, no?
Yeah, no, it wasn't. Cut.
Okay, good.
That was a 3-letter word, not a...
Good stuff.
Well, David, they introduced more CGI later on in the show. Did you think that kind of lost something, the show, or it added to it?
Yeah, it lost me.
Did it spoil the charm a bit, though, do you think, of the look?
No, I'd done, I think, about 48 dungeon rooms. I was pretty well dungeoned out. But they were using sections in the CGI later.
I have to say, I did feel it lost a bit of the magic, because I think David created the magic with the look of the thing. And although it developed in other ways, I always felt we just lost a bit of that original magic when David's stuff went. That's all right, David. That's how I feel. That's why they've never had me back.
So where did the catchphrase, all nasty, come from?
Well, it wasn't intended to be a catchphrase, but very early on we had various ways of getting rid of the kids. and one was to drop them from an enormous height, where we had an animation of this sort of child falling. Actually upset Mary Whitehouse a lot, this did. We got letters saying that I was this nasty old man trying to kill off children and things. Anyway, but the trouble is, this animation took a bit of time, you see, and nothing was happening. So when I first went in, I went, ooh, nasty, to cover the fall.
And the classic wince.
Yes. Oh.
There's always those corridor scenes with the blades flying down.
Now this is quite interesting. We called that Gatwick. Because of the moving walkway at the Gatwick Airport. But the thing about it was, they would put it in if they thought things were slowing down or getting a bit dreary, and I'd suddenly hear, Hugo, we're putting in Gatwick. And the poor kids. The great thing about it was it made them jump about, you see. It made them be physical. Or at least the dungeoneer had to start jumping, and they were shouting, down, left, right, up, whatever, The thing is, we never actually sliced anybody's head off. I thought we could have some nice blood and things, but no, we didn't. We didn't manage to slice anybody up, so it was a good trick, though.
The life forces always seemed a bit kind of random. Was that a technique that was employed for some reason?
That was just a way of keeping the thing speeded up, keeping time, keeping pace on it, because it's like I say about the bomb room. It used to drive me mad, this wonderful bomb room. So, where are we? We're in a room. What? Describe the room. Well, there's a large bomb, and there's a fuse, and the fuse
probably nothing
is a
to worry
light.
about.
What do we do? Oh, what do we do? Do we go? What do you think we should do? I think it's obvious. Run like hell. Get out of it. But you know, they wouldn't. And so in the end, we had to find a way of slowing the fuse down to give them time to find a way out of this thing. We never blew up anybody, by the way.
I was asked to do a second bomb room, and it had a much shorter, faster fuse. And if a team was really no good, it was the second bomb room for you.
Paul, you play Treguard in Knightmare Live.
I do.
What's the concept of the show? What's it about?
Well, Knightmare Live is the sort of recreation of Knightmare, and we try and sort of. It's a sort of friendly, lovely pastiche to it. It's never. There's always a good sense of fun about it, and a sort of fond remembrance of the TV show without ever, sort of taking the mick, really. Because there are certain aspects of it, like the bomb room thing. If you sort of peel under the surface, it doesn't really sort of hold up. Was Treguard happy that they died, or unhappy that they died? Why is their face falling off? Why does fruit prevent this? So we sort of delve into a few of the added questions, which is quite fun. But ultimately, it's sort of a lovely excuse for people who used to watch the TV show to come and unleash a load of catharsis at the stage, because the goblin horn will sound and you'll be transported back to your childhoods, and everyone will scream. The person in the hat won't be able to hear anything. They'll probably die. Great. We go, ooh, nasty. And you feel like this is completion. But what's really nice now is everyone's starting to bring their kids. So the kids are having a great time. Have you brought your kid? Yeah, lovely stuff. Because what kid doesn't love an adventure and a quest? Occasionally we get kids up on stage and stick them in the hat, and it's amazing. They're intuitive. I got one kid up who's like 15 once in Norwich, and he came off stage afterwards and goes, "Wow, that was better than watching it, wasn't it?" I had so much fun. You go, "This is brilliant. You were talking to a big wall puppet, and they just buy into it." I tell you what, we got up 2 kids once, because I got this young boy, and his little sister was sitting next to him, and I thought, God, if I get him up, she looks distraught. So I got them both up. And so he wore the hat, and she sort of stood next to him, cowering behind the eye shield. It was the cutest thing you've ever seen. And so our Lord Fear is going, I can't kill that. That is... I mean, I've got some morals. So, but it's borderline pantomime.
Well, what made Hugo so good that you wanted to kind of follow his character and continue it in Knightmare Live?
It's just one of those iconic characters from that era of television. You can't. The only hope is that I sort of do it justice, and this sort of lovely relationship between him and Lord Fear can come into play. And so we bring back some of the other characters and sort of play around with the convention of who owns this castle, who owns the dungeon. Do they work together? Is there a joint lease? Have they? There's a lot of admin involved in it, and there's a kind of odd couple relationship between Treguard and Lord Fear. But I've always, from my childhood, it's generally like one of my favourite ever TV shows. And so to be able to sort of replicate that is an immense honour, and to sort of embody, Treguard. I mean, look at me, covered in studs.
Well, Hugo, Treguard did get a sidekick with the elf Pickle in a series 4.
Can I just say about that? I often wonder if Lord Fear and Treguard are actually one and the same person. It's a sort of Jekyll and Hyde character.
Well, that's the plot for next year sorted out. Lovely.
Well, when Pickle was brought into the show, I mean, did that help, having someone to bounce off?
It was more being able to comment on the action. It's very difficult to comment on the action by yourself. And so that was the plan with getting Pickle in. I don't think we did that much commenting, but sometimes we did have to say something like, I don't know what the hell they're doing, team, or something. So it was quite handy that way, yeah. Yeah,
it was like, we've described Pickle as the sort of the Microsoft Word paperclip of the show. Oh, it looks like you're on a quest. Yes. Would you like some help?
If something funny was going on set, was it hard to stay in character and keep composure?
To be honest, not for me. I'm so stoical you wouldn't believe it. I mean, I never corpse or giggle. No. I think, to be honest, I was too concerned about what was coming next. As I say, with the girl who hit the back wall, I suspect I did allow myself a brief smile. But I was supposed to be stern, so I didn't. I just think everybody was under tremendous pressure. We loved it, but it was, full of adrenaline. The thing, if you think of those poor guys actually in the void, trying to improvise with these kids, and sometimes they weren't the slightest bit helpful, and you're trying to get them to say something or do something or choose something or whatever, and they're just being totally dim, that is very difficult. So, yeah, I think everybody was sort of hyped up quite a lot.
Recently, in 2013, they did a Geek Week special. What did you guys think of that?
Well, it was very strange. Tim phoned me up and said, who was it? YouTube, that's right. They said they want to do a show, a Knightmare show. I said, really? Yes. Were you interested? I said, yes, we'll do it. It was very odd, very deja vu, because I was in the same dressing room, in the same studio, in the same costume as I had been 25 years previously. It was a bit surreal.
Because it was filmed in the same place.
Yeah, exactly the same place. And we had these, pardon my ignorance, I expect all of you know this, but they were YouTube stars. Now, I don't actually know what a YouTube star is, and I'm sure they're wonderful people. They were very nice people, but they were the worst games players I think we ever had.
Yeah, they didn't quite
were
click,
terrible.
did they? Yeah.
Believe it or not, they managed to blow themselves out at exactly the right number of minutes for us to have made a program. And everybody all thought we'd fixed it, but we hadn't. They really did that. It was as though they'd timed it to a T, But they weren't very exciting as game players. Very nice people.
Had they planned more of the episode then, in case they went online?
Who knows? I don't know why we did it, how we did it, or anything else. We did it, and that was the last I heard of it, so I have no idea what it was about.
Well, that was a great day. I was there on that day. We got a lovely invite to the studio in Norwich. Tim was like, come up. Also, bring your helmet. We need a helmet.
Yeah.
So the helmet they use on the one is one I made, which I can tell you had a very strange odour inside. And had real cow horns. It was really heavy. I had this stupid idea thinking, real cow horns, come on, authenticity. So yeah, me and Tom were at the studio that day having a lovely time. So, running around into the blue screen box, big pictures. When I got drunk with you guys afterwards, that was great fun. And then Tim Child gave us a bunch of props at the end. And we thought, what a generous, generous man. For giving us the actual chest from Knightmare, a couple of shields, some prop swords. And all he was really doing was clearing out his shed. I've had it for 25 years, I really don't need it anymore.
Well, Hugo, was it hard to kind of find the character of Treguard again after so long, or did it come straight back to you?
It came straight back in, I can assure you. No trouble at all.
Why did Knightmare finish on TV, and were you upset when it did end?
Well, I just said, join us again for Knightmare. And then they axed it, yeah, so I was pretty upset. I think we had 2 years more worth of stuff that we could have done. I've had all sorts of reasons given to me why it was axed, but I think the truth is that Knightmare cost, I was told, about a third as much as a drama to make. And if you think back to that particular period, that's when this huge number of channels suddenly emerged. And, of course, advertising revenue didn't grow by that amount, so it had to be spread amongst all these channels. It was just too expensive. Nobody'd make it today. 5 bob worth of cartoon will do, stick it in, give the kids that. That's what happened.
Well, we're going to give the audience a chance to ask some questions now, so if you'd like to ask any questions about our panel, just raise your hand. Ravi will run over with a microphone.
Speaking as someone who's an actor himself, how did you find making that transition from doing something with kind of like scripted to something like Knightmare, which you had to do a bit of improv with?
Well, I think the short answer is frightening. Yeah, in a play, of course, you learn the lines, and if you don't, you're the one who looks a complete fool. But in this, although a lot of what I did was sort of scripted, it was the voice from the gods in my ear that was the terrifying thing. And sometimes they change a scenario totally, and they gave it to me word for word. So I was getting the riddles, if you like, through my earpiece and relaying them to the children, because they decided to do something quite different. So that was quite hairy, because I haven't got the best hearing. I've got even worse now, but I hoped I said the right thing. You know.
I've got another question here.
Hello. I just wanted to know if Knightmare continued, what 3 ideas would you have liked to seen in that series if it continued? Any of you guys?
Larger salary. No,
More spikes. I don't.
Well, I'd like to see it.
The return to the original painted backdrops.
No, I think what Tim would have done if he'd had the technology would have pushed it to the limit, like he did in the first place.
Yeah.
And I've got a couple of friends who are software developers, and what we've done, and we're aiming to get onto your smart TV, a 3D environment, beautifully lit, full radiosity, full 3D, that you can view through VR, but also we've managed to harness voice control. So a group can be sitting, watching their smart TV, looking at the avatar on the screen, holding up a torch in a dingy old room, and then tell him to walk forward or step left or step onto a particular part of the floor, which will trigger all sorts of exciting actions. I think that's the way I'd like to see it go, and I think it's got huge potential, both for all those people who wanted to be on the show and couldn't get on. They can now sit on a sofa with friends, discuss what move to do next, and proceed through the dungeon that way in their living room.
So I remember in the early 2000s there was an attempt to do like a VR kind of Knightmare, wasn't there? An animated series?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, Tim, I think, always wanted to get rid of the helmet, which I always thought was a mistake. It's what made it. And as I say, you know, watching virtual reality ads on television, there's grandmother enjoying herself and all the family around going, yes, yes, whereas in fact they'd be saying, give it to me, it's my go. You know, it's not much fun watching someone else enjoy themselves, is it? So you want to be involved with the thing. That's the problem. I think you've got... Why it works so well is because I always say, the advisors were shouting at the Dungeoneer and people at home were shouting at the advisors. Yeah. You've got 2 levels of drama there.
Hello. I've actually done Knightmare Live. It's an amazing show, so do go and do it. My question's to the 2 Treguards. What has been your favourite deaths? I'm nasty like that.
Favourite deaths?
Oh, yeah.
We did a version of the show where, to spice things up, we had an insta-kill in the first room. Because, you know... the first time we did the show, we couldn't figure out a way of how could we kill people off and start at the beginning, because we'd have to brief people what it's like to be in the hat. And after a while, we go, actually, you don't really need to do that. Everyone who's up for being under the helmet will get the idea. So we started to sort of welcome in the change. It'd be the first room, there'd be an anagram, and then a Fright Night would turn up and poof, dead. And you just go, what, that's room 1? And you go, yeah, got to get on your toes. And you're like, oh, okay. And it just put everybody on edge. And it was really good fun. Every now and again we bring that back because fun to kill. I shouldn't say that. That sounds like the bad guy. But
I don't really have one. I mean, it's an awful thing to say, but I don't. I just loved it all. So the things that amused me perhaps weren't the best bits. I mean, I remember we had one team a team of boys, quite boisterous lads, had to stay overnight in a hotel because their game, you know, we had finished for the day and go on the next day. And they turned up the next day and one of the boys had a wonderful black eye. They'd had a falling out during the night and they'd walloped this poor kid. And there he was. So makeup took about 3 hours to sort of camouflage this black eye so we could actually go on filming. Well, it amused me. I shouldn't have been amused, but it did. I think.
That would have done some explaining in the show, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
The other ones I like are the pathetic death, where someone fails to pick up a banana and that dead. Great. It's so good at this bit with the live when we have the banana on the chest and people walk up and they knock the banana onto the floor in front of the chest and their face is falling off. And you know there's no way they're going to get around to it. You're like going, you failed to put fruit in a bag. And ergo, that's how you went.
Hello. I just wondered how many people completed the quest on TV, and how many people complete the quest on Knightmare Live, and then what the prizes are, or what the prizes were for each.
Do you know the ones for TV? How many people won?
How many people won, so to speak? There were 8 in all, in 8 series. That didn't mean there was 1 a series. Sometimes we had 2 a series, sometimes none, etc., etc. What they got was absolutely all at the beginning. I think followed by a scroll, which wasn't terribly dramatic, but at least it was democratic. They all got one. The worst thing was a very nice statuette made in steel called a Fright Night. They thought this was great. The winners could have one of these. Can you imagine giving one Fright Night to a team of 4 who all lived in different houses with different families? I mean, it was disastrous. I'm having it. No, it's mine. You're having it. You know. Well, you can have it for a week. No, I want it for a month. No, oh dear.
One of them came to a Knightmare Live show with his Fright Night trophy. I got the trophy. Not got friends, but got a trophy. I'm elaborating, I don't know. For Knightmare Live, we essentially, because it has to run for an hour and you have to have the sense of completion, there always has to be sort of like, we used to have it so that we sort of fudge it up until the last room that you'd stay alive. Now we sort of kill people off and we just swap people in and out, and then you continue the quest from where the person left off, and you get to the end, and it's basically the last room you have is the 50-50. We usually have the room of blades or the block and tackle room, and if you survive that, you've won the quest, and if you don't, you haven't. And the prizes have always been very, very minimal, like badges. We're doing scrolls now, because that was what they did on the TV shows, trying to keep sort of as authentic as I can. Yeah, it's one of those things. Have you seen the French version? Chevalier de Labyrinth. Oh, it's Nightmare, but it's not really Nightmare. There's a guy in this red velvet doublet with like a mullet. He's so French! Oh, Chevalier! It's incredible. And the kids go through, and it's done in one episode instead of over several. So if one kid dies, they swap him in with the other team, and they have to the length of the episode to win, to get to the end. And if they do, they get a Sega Mega Drive. I know! No, it's not the way. All right? It's not Funhouse. Not here to give people boxes of prizes. It's about learning life lessons. Yes.
I've got another question here.
I've just got one question that was based on all the arguments that we had as kids. From all 3 of you, would you rather have been the person in the helmet or the one in the studio watching the action?
Oh, I mean, the brightest kids always wanted to be under the helmet, which is where we least wanted them to be. We wanted them to be with the advisors. Because, apart from anything else, what has Mum got to look at when he comes on the television? Nothing. So, I mean, it was very sad. We could never persuade them. We always said, no, you'd be much better as an advisor. No, I'm going under the helmet. I'm going under the helmet. And they did. And, of course, all they got was do this, do that, sidestep left, whatever. They didn't really contribute that much to the thing. So, yeah, be an advisor every time. You don't get chopped up. And it doesn't really matter if you make mistakes.
Yeah, advisor. I think I can see the joy of being in the hat. Under the helmet of justice is my short phrase, in the hat. Because you get to talk to the other characters. And sometimes, it's great fun to improvise, and you can sort of sneak your way around a person. There was one shopkeeper in the original TV show from Birmingham who's sort of like, not the kids going, what if I gave you some fairy dust? And he was like, no. And his kid's brain's going, I've got all sorts of stuff I can give this guy. I'm offering him everything. And this guy's going, no, I just need the prop that's in your hand. So it's a shame to have some, but yeah, under the hat, you can really use your imagination and go, come on, deal with me.
I've got another question here.
I think can I just say the real complaint that I think was quite valid from some people in the press was that we did teach children to bribe.
Hi there. Thank you, first of all, for childhood memories and recreating childhood memories, and for letting someone fall off the stage yesterday.
That didn't happen.
Okay, no public liability.
I didn't get that.
Just a quick question. You mentioned the YouTube channel earlier. Has the idea been pitched for Knightmare, maybe with Knightmare Live editions to ITV or Dave for a celebrity type thing?
Almost constantly for about 4 years. But the wheels of television move very, very slowly. There's been sort of several meetings and iterations and talks and pitches to several different channels with different people and companies taking up the reins and then letting them go again. The sad fact is television is a very fickle business, especially nowadays. What's weird is that obviously things have come back. You know, Crystal Maze has come back and is doing really well. Robot Wars has come back and has done reasonably well. Although they seem to think the key to doing things is putting Dara O'Brien on the front of them. Which is odd. I love Dara O'Brien. He's great. But I watch Robot Wars for 2 words. Robot Wars. All right? If you're not interested, that's enough, isn't it, to watch a TV show? So we'd love to... I'd love to see Knightmare come back on television. It'd be awful if Jack Whitehall was Treguard or something. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? You're getting some awful bearded comedian who people know. Get me back. Yeah, so yes, but no, but yes.
Quite interesting to note that, in fact, Tim had a hell of a job trying to sell this the first time round. He went to all the television companies, and they all hummed and hawed, and nobody would actually do it. And when he got back to Anglia, where he worked, and he said, well, you know, what about you doing it? And they said, no. And they said, except if you became independent, i.e. they were telling him to give up his job at Anglia and become an independent producer, so that it wasn't their responsibility. Then they'd give him some backing, which is an amazing sacrifice he made and taking an amazing risk, but he did it. And so all kudos to him, because he chucked up his career as a journalist in television and risked it all on this programme. So I think that was absolutely stunning.
I think it is testament to how incredible Knightmare was, 30 years ago. The fact that if you see it on like Challenge TV or YouTube now, the shows are still as enjoyable now as they were all that time ago. So I think it is testament to the great work that you did and you continue to do now.
And he was so handsome too.
Where can people see Knightmare Live next?
Knightmare Live, oddly, is sort of a summer gig. I'm trying to get another show together in London. There's some guys who, what are they? Prepare to Try? Is everyone aware of those guys? No? No. They're some YouTubers as well. They run a Twitch thing, but they're really keen on doing a show in London, so I'm going to try and get another one out before the end of the year. You can find Knightmare Live on Facebook and on Twitter at Knightmare Live. We have a website. So we're sort of constantly trying to do shows at various places around the UK. We do go on odd bits of tours, but mostly we're doing conventions and things nowadays. Do board game conventions and nerdy conventions. So yeah, come and find us on that, and hopefully you'll come and see us again. That would be great.
Well, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing your memories, and please give a big thank you to our panel.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you indeed.